Welcome back. I am Renita.
And I am Jermaine.
And today we're going to talk about the differences between parenting a singleton and twins. Singleton, that's what you call a single.
I was like, a singleton.
That's what you call a single child when you give birth to just one child. They're called a singleton.
Okay. So if you don't know, we have 3-year-old twin boys. We also have 3 other kids, 2 more boys and a girl, which makes up our total blended family of 5 kids. While we understand that there is no true or correct answer in this matter, we want to give you our opinion in this case. I'm reading this because I'm trying to do intros now and make it a little better. So whether you have kids now or are planning on having kids in the future, this will be a great watch and listen for you today. We will talk about the birth of our kids, finances, disciplines, the pros and cons of both situations. Our hope is that the information we give you, you'll value and be added to your life and help you out.
Awesome. So first, I know you said birth, but I think that it's important to talk about just the pregnancy in general.
Right, that's what
because it's extremely different. Well, for me, in my case, it was different anyway, since Keone, as you guys know from previous ones, he was premature.
Right.
And the twins I carried until almost 36 weeks. So that alone was completely different.
Right.
You know, obviously with Keone, I was very small still, barely had a stomach, was able to still move around, function like everything was fine. And the twins, I feel like kicked my whole behind. Like, it was always tired, hard to move, feet were swollen. It was just awful.
Okay. So that makes sense. So with regards to Keone, obviously, because he was born at how many weeks?
28 weeks.
28 weeks. You didn't really get a lot of stuff. Did you even feel him bump or kick or do anything?
I felt kicking probably around 16 weeks, so I did get to experience all that. I did have a little bump. I did gain 40 pounds.
Okay.
But my stomach was very little. So, of course, people could recognize that I was pregnant.
Right.
But it's also my first baby, so, it wasn't going to be popped out that much. But, yeah, it was, the whole experience. I only went to the doctor, the minimal amount of times, so everything was just different with the pregnancy part.
Okay. And see, and then in my situation, in my past relationship with the pregnancy, unfortunately with my daughter, the way that it transpired, I didn't find out till she was a little later in the pregnancy, and I wasn't really around for a bunch of that. And with my son, for the most part, I was around during that, but nothing extreme ever happened or anything happened. Everything was normal. He was a bigger baby, like 9 pounds, almost 10 pounds, but like both of your kids, they were both C-section. The first one was an emergency C-section, even though she was, I think, like 34, 35 weeks. And the second one, it was planned out with it, like our twins were.
Okay.
In that circumstance. But so with the twins, obviously I was with you. The great thing about the twins is I was with you from day one.
Right.
And I remember in the beginning, when you got your bumps and all that type of stuff, it wasn't no issues. In that thing. It was just finding out that they were twins that was a little bit scary for me.
Right. I mean, I think felt fine. Everything was fine for maybe 23 weeks or so.
Right.
And not to say that it was just a really hard pregnancy, but it's just the feeling was just different.
Okay.
It was just a different feeling. It was just like the pressure was different. That's what even took us to the hospital to find out that they were twins.
Right.
So then I was feeling fine and all that. But like the main difference I would say with just the pregnancy too was, of course, with the twins, because of my cervix issue, we had a lot more appointments. I feel like we were going, I think in a normal pregnancy, you just kind of go per trimester, or maybe I don't even remember how often you go, but I know you don't have a lot of ultrasounds in a regular pregnancy.
Right.
With the twins, we had an ultrasound every time we went to the doctor.
Right.
She was checking my cervix. She was making sure everybody was good and all that. So that was definitely different. Remember, we went to the regular doctor, I think every 2 weeks, and then the specialist every 2 weeks and then eventually every week.
Right. And that was because of obviously the incompetent cervix that you had and
Right.
the steroids I had to give you and everything, trying to keep the babies in, which if that was detected in the first situation with Keone, it would have been a different circumstance as well. But his
Right.
birthday would have been a lot later. He would have been born at a different
November
time
probably,
span.
or
Right.
October, yeah.
Okay. So let's go to the birth. Okay. So with Keone, we sort of kind of already talked about it
Right.
in that aspect, but it was an emergency C-section.
It was an emergency C-section and
Okay.
early, so of course I was, terrified.
Right.
And I was in the room by myself.
Oh, wow.
His dad couldn't be there, and my mom, no one was in there, so that was scary. And it was my first baby, so very scary.
Okay. And see, in my situation with my daughter, it was the same situation. It was an emergency C-section. I don't really remember because I was at work. So I remember being called like, hey, she's in the hospital. She may be having the baby now. Come on down. Thank goodness the hospital was right around the corner from where I was working at the time off of Arrow Drive. She was at, what is that?
Mary
hospital?
Birch or?
No. And where we take the kids and so forth.
Children's?
Right. Yeah, Children's. At Children's
Mary
Hospital.
Birch probably.
Okay, Mary Birch. And so I go there, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, it's an emergency. Now in our situation, and this is the thing that happened that sort of kind of made me upset, but she was, obviously pregnant with my daughter. And when the emergency C-section thing happened, they allowed one person to go into the room. And, obviously I'm the dad. Now me and her mom weren't necessarily together, but I figured, okay, I'm the dad. I'm going to be able to go in there. And unfortunately, she chose her mom to go into there. And I remember thinking like, well, me and you made the baby, not your mom. But later, after talking to her about it, it made a little bit of sense. She said the reason why she chose her mom is because she felt like I was just there. I'd have been just there for the my daughter, and she wanted someone there for herself as well. But nevertheless, that's what transpired. Of course, I was upset and mad about it, but that was that situation. Now, since I'm talking now, we'll go to JJ's situation, which was similar to the twins, on the mere fact that because she had that first C-section, there was a scheduled date in which to have the baby, and similar situation. I was there. I did get to see that situation in that circumstance. But fast forwarding to the twins, how was that situation for you? The day of the actual birth.
Well, we had a scheduled C-section, but
Right.
I believe it was January 30th that it was scheduled for.
Right.
Because of my cervix and the way, well, pretty much because of how I had Keone and the way they had to cut my uterus, they didn't want me
Right.
to have a vaginal delivery. That wasn't
Right.
an option because sometimes they'll give you that option.
Right.
If you have a C-section, you do have the option to have what they call a VBAC, but because of how I had him, they're like, no, that would be dangerous, so you have
Right.
to have a C-section. Okay, so we scheduled it for January 30th. And so, my doctor was going to be there. We had our plan of keeping the placentas. I was going to encapsulate them and all that stuff. And then, as we talked before, we had a couple of scares thinking that I was in labor prior.
Right.
So when I was first feeling what I was feeling, I'm like, oh, it's no big deal. Like, I'm probably fine. 3 o'clock came, and I'm like, this is serious. So we had to go on the 26th. And once I got there, I was dilated. I'm pretty sure Jamari was kind of coming down the birth canal. Right. And so they kind of had a rush. And the way it's interesting to me, but I get it because obviously your doctor can't be there 24/7. So it's like a team of doctors. Same thing
Right.
happened with Keone. My doctor didn't deliver him. Somebody else on the team did. Same thing with the twins. So it was somebody else on the team who delivered me. And of course he was acting like, well, first of all, I'm all over the place, sorry. Yeah. But, we had the babies at 5:50, 5:51. So I think, we were his last C-section.
Right.
So not that he was rushing, but it was like he wasn't trying to do anything extra. He was
Right.
trying to go home. I mean,
Right.
let's just be real. So he was like, I don't know nothing about the placentas. We didn't discuss that. I don't know. So we're just going to do this. So it was different in that it wasn't so rushed. Obviously, you got to come in and,
Right.
I got there probably 4 a.m. and I had them at 5:50, 5:51. So it was a lot less. I wasn't as worried. And because of the weeks that I wasn't feeling like, oh, they're going to go to the NICU and all that.
Okay. And see, for myself as a father within that the confinement, obviously everything was scheduled, so it was simple. It wasn't like, you're on call like a lot of people who have their babies natural. I watch movies and the dad is like got the bag packed and they're ready to go. We just pretty much knew when it was going to happen. But when they initially take you back there and they prep you, I got to sit down in the hall and wait for them to call me back. And so on my mind, that whole time span, all I was thinking is hopefully the kids are healthy. That's all I cared about, is them being healthy. And then you go back there and you go through it. Obviously, I'm not going through the pain. I get to see a lot more than you do because they have the shield up and so forth. And, that transpires.
But what did you see? Did you see them cut me open and all that?
No, actually, they didn't allow me to see like that part. Pretty much when I came in, they pretty much Jamari. They pretty much already had him almost coming out. So they reached in. I saw them reach in and grab you. But mind you, when the posting was up, I was still behind it.
Okay.
So I didn't get to like see them grab you like I did with my son. I actually saw them reaching in there trying to grab him and it was a little too much for me. But with you, they had me behind it.
Okay.
So when they pulled him out, I seen Jamari hand him out, and then he's crying and doing whatever, and then they pulled out Kyrie, and obviously that's when the little scare happened. He was breathing.
He cried, but it just wasn't. And now looking back, I feel like that's just Kyrie's personality.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he's just more mellow and relaxed unless he's just on a good one.
Right.
But so now looking back, I'm like, was it that serious? Probably not.
Right.
Because they were saying, even when I look at our videos, I'm like, he was crying. He just wasn't screaming like Jamari. Jamari's a little extra though.
Right.
So that makes sense. Like it was
like his mama.
Even when in my stomach, he would always be moving and active, and Kyrie would just be chilling and letting him take all the space. So I think that it was more like that. But yeah, we did have a little bit of a scare where they had to take him back to observe him. Where they took him, I still don't know because they didn't have a NICU at the hospital. So they took him back somewhere. I don't know. But they brought him fairly quickly. I mean, I had him by like 8 o'clock.
Right.
So maybe a couple hours he was in there. So yeah, that was totally different because with Keone, I didn't see him until I had him at 8 p.m., 8:31, I think, p.m. And I didn't see him till like midnight.
Right.
Because, I have to recover. I'm like shaking. I did not do well with the anesthesia at all with Keone. So by the time I saw him, it was like, the next day essentially. And I couldn't hold him. I did get to hold him, but it wasn't, he had tubes and it was very scary to see him.
Right.
Whereas with Jamari, I don't know, were you holding him? I don't know where he was while I was getting all
I helped
prepped.
cut his umbilical cord, and then they weighed him and then got the measurements and stuff. And I got to hold him. And I actually held to get a picture. I don't know if you remember because you were sort of kind of in and out, but next to you.
I do remember that. I don't remember how him and I both got to our room, though, is what I'm saying. Did you carry him there or did the nurses?
No, they took him. I think they put him in one of those little
and then
things and pushed him. Right.
Okay. So, that was a whole new experience, just being able to be with the babies like right away.
Right.
And in the hospital, that was definitely a new experience. But, yeah.
Okay. So, the next subject that we'll talk about is planned versus not planned kids. Now, with Keone, was he planned?
Keone was not planned.
Not planned. Okay. And then, so then how was that? So you basically found out you were pregnant, or
similar to you, his dad and I were not together when I found out.
Okay.
So of course that puts you in a place where it's like, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
Of course I told him, and he was like, this decision is yours, obviously. He wasn't, I didn't feel pressured one way or the other. He wasn't like, I definitely want to have this kid. And he wasn't like, I am not interested in this kid. It was just kind of like, whatever you want to do, I'm, okay with either decision. And so I thought about it for a very short time because honestly, not having baby wasn't an option. But I did have to be like, okay, is this something that I could do by myself or like co-parenting? Because I thought it was best that we weren't together just because of where we were out in life. And I was like really young and I'm like, and he was not sure what he was going to do with the military. But then when I decided to keep Keone, he was very involved with the pregnancy and like going to the doctors and all that,
Right.
but it wasn't planned.
Okay. And similar in my situation with Ania, obviously it wasn't planned. Like I told you, I didn't find out till, well, I had an idea that she might have been pregnant, and I was hearing through the grapevine that she was pregnant. I assumed that it had to have been my kid. And I didn't find out till she was about 5 or 6 months pregnant and showing. And then with JJ, it was sort of kind of planned, but it wasn't, we weren't in position to we shouldn't have had another kid at that time span. But, we were back together and we ended up having it. So with the twins, would you say that we planned the twins or no?
I would say with the twins, the timing wasn't planned.
Okay.
However, I was not on birth control. Now, mind you, I mean, we were planning a wedding, so it wasn't expecting to get pregnant when we did.
Right.
But in my head, I wanted to get pregnant soon after we got married, for sure.
Right.
I'm thinking we'll get pregnant, we get married in July, we'll get pregnant in August,
Right.
Definitely by January the next year. I
Right.
wasn't planning on having babies in January the next
Right.
year. So that
Right.
part, I would say the timing definitely wasn't like the right timing, but we definitely talked about having obviously one baby at some point soon after we got married.
Okay. And so, similar. You know how I am. So on to the finances. Do you remember, see, the funny thing about the finances with your first kid, I remember buying everything for Ania, shoes, all this type of stuff that she didn't really need. That you buy shoes that are 2 months, and she had like 8 or 9 pair of shoes at 2 months. And the reality is, I never thought of, well, next month she'll be 3 months, her feet will get a little bigger, and she won't be able to fit the stuff. But because it was my first kid, and I had no due on it, all I could think of is, man, when I was a kid, I wanted everything, and so I just bought a bunch of stuff and wasted a lot of money. How was the situation with you with Keone?
It was definitely similar. I think also, age and all that. I was younger. It was just him and I. I had
Right.
or at least I thought I had the finances. I mean, I wasn't saving much. But I would say more than just it being my first kid, I think that's just the difference with singletons versus twins.
Right.
You only have one.
I'm sorry.
You only have one to buy for.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, I'll spend $50 on a pair of shoes.
Right.
But when you double that, it's like, whoa, $100, like that's too much.
Okay.
Like I think that's what because we're talking about
difference is.
differences here. So I think that's the main thing. It's not so much. I think that if I would have had twins first, it would have been the same thing. It just like hits you more when it's like I would spend $30-$40 on a sweater, which was crazy, but it just $30. But $60, that seems like so much more and just silly at that point. I think that's what definitely changes the game, is because everything's doubled.
Okay. And so with the twins, I would say that our finances were sort of kind of good. Thanks to you, there were a lot of things that had transpired and happened. Now, I want to say this. A lot of times, for those of you who are listening and watching, you have parents out there, and I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, but you have parents out there, and I would say in my situation, because I'm a budgeter and type of thing, some of these parents get it and some parents don't get it. But taking like hand-me-down stuff or old stuff in certain situations and certain circumstances, when you understand the bigger picture, like, hey, these toys, we'll get them used. We'll get this or that used. These pants, these things, just wash it and get it used instead of buying brand new. And there are parents out there who just don't want to deal with giving their kids anything hand-me-down. They want to have stuff brand new. And if you can afford it, I guess, go that route. But majority of Americans, we can't really afford to be buying all that type of stuff. And if you can save a lot of money with regards to that. What gave you the idea of taking, you were okay with getting hand-me-down clothes and so forth for our twins? It makes me think of the kids that you watched at that one time, those parents. But nevertheless, what was it?
Well, even just growing up, my mom would always tell me, like, you take whatever, and if you just get one item from that pile, that's one thing that you didn't have before.
Right.
So it was always instilled in me, we had a nice house, we had nice things. I did get stuff that I wanted, but my mom never made it seem like hand-me-downs were bad,
right,
or they were like gross or whatever.
Right.
So I didn't have that idea. So even with Keone clothes, well, I remember one of my roommates, her sister was like, I have all this baby stuff for you. And of course I was like, okay, it's probably going to be a few, little. She had so much stuff, high chairs, toys, like just probably 98% of the stuff I could use, and they
wow.
were really good quality.
Right.
So I knew at that moment, okay, this is the route. Like back then, Facebook Market wasn't big, but Craigslist was big. So I got a lot of choice for Keone.
Right.
Not so much, like I said, not so much clothes because I didn't know anybody who could hand them down, but I would say 80% of his Christmas gifts, because kids don't care if they're brand new in the box.
Right.
Like it's better for them to be set up anyway.
Right.
So I would get like all his stuff hand me down, like whether it was
wow.
Craigslist or from a friend or whatever.
Huh, I would have never guessed that, because you remember I always talk about when I looked at your YouTube and your Instagram, and I saw pictures of him. He was just so, like, everything was decked out, the clothes. But obviously I didn't see any stuff. You had him taking, like, model pictures when he was, like, 2 years old. And then he was a photographer for a little bit of time.
Right.
But nevertheless, okay, so I didn't know that that's what it was. I thought you learned, or I got a little more of that at that time span. So for people who are listening, it's okay for hand-me-downs, right?
Right. I mean,
why would you say that?
Because kids grow out of stuff, clothes and toys, so quickly.
Right.
And so even what I realized with Keone, with his clothes, for instance, I didn't do that much for his clothes. And so when I was handing them down to my god sister's son,
Right.
the quality was like impeccable. Like
Right.
the stuff was almost brand new.
Right.
Because that's what happens. You get either too much and
Right.
they can't wear everything, or, I wouldn't dry his clothes.
Right.
So it would be such great quality still. So I would always be open to it. Now, there has been times where I have gotten crap. I'm just be
Right.
honest.
Right.
And I would have to either like throw them out or whatever, that happens.
Right.
But majority of the time, you're able to get such great things. I don't think I've ever bought Keone pajamas, and the twins hardly ever, because of hand-me-downs.
Okay. And see, and another point that I wanted to bring out that you said to me when it came to the twins, when you were, I don't know if this was before. No, I think this was before the twins were even born. But you were
Oh,
babysitting the one family with our mom and all
right.
them, and they're pretty well off, right?
They're, wealthy.
Pretty wealthy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And their kids pretty much dressed how?
She would get hand-me-downs from her patients at her clinic.
She's a doctor.
And he would love, whatever. It would be clothes that maybe I would think would be, a little bit worn.
Right.
But he loved them.
Right.
And she would let them wear them.
Right.
And they didn't care. Like even her car, which was like an older car.
Right.
And it was like, but they were able to go on great vacations. Like
Right.
just the stuff that they prioritized to me was like amazing.
Right.
And at that point too, I was like, see, kids don't care so much about brands. I would say even
Right.
Keone now to this day, he's not really stuck on brands per
Right.
se. Even though when he was little, I would care probably more.
Right.
But he doesn't. They don't care about that. I feel like kids ultimately care about time spent, and of course maybe certain toys or whatever.
Right.
But it's not like materials like I would think.
Yeah, completely. I mean, even with the twins and so forth, it's the same thing. I mean, for the most part, parents are. If you see a little kid and decked out designer stuff, majority, and maybe 99% of the time, it's the parents. It's
Right.
not the kid. The kid will want the Kmart Batman shoes or Superman shoes or whatever, because
True.
they like those things a lot better.
Right.
Given that. So for those of you who are listening, take hand-me-downs, especially with twins, because that stuff gets costly. I would say with the twins, they have a plethora of toys. And what percentage of those toys do you think we actually came out of our pocket and bought?
Maybe 5%.
5%.
I mean, they get a few things on Christmas and a few things on their birthday, but I would also say for people listening that to utilize Facebook Market, there's buy nothing groups in
Right.
Facebook too that people are constantly giving away stuff.
Right.
I would say most of their stuff came from there.
Right.
I mean, they have gotten trampolines and basketball hoops and
Right.
trucks and superheroes. I mean, all their stuff.
Right.
Or like, people that I babysat, their kids get bigger and they're like, oh, do you guys want this? Whatever the case.
Right.
And the kids don't care. They don't, I mean, of course you wipe the stuff down, make sure everything is sanitized, but it's good quality stuff and they are so happy. And Jamari's always saying like, we have so many toys.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, thanks to all the free stuff.
Right. And so, that's perfectly fine with regards to that. So let's transition to discipline. And when I say discipline, I'm not necessarily saying whether we whoop our kids or not whoop our kids or whatever the circumstance is. But one of the things you used to always say, because basically, I mean, you have an older brother, but you were basically raised as a single kid during your childhood, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, can you explain the feeling of being the only child?
I mean, sometimes it was lonely, but other times I liked it because I didn't have to share.
Right.
I got to do pretty much what I wanted in terms of, activities and like the house. I would get whatever I wanted for the most part.
Right.
So, and then when I was lonely, I would just have a friend over.
Okay.
So overall, I think I enjoyed it. I do wonder how it'd be if my brother and I were closer in age, but I think that we both, because of the age difference, kind of had our individual
Right.
like childhoods in a way, and kind of were spoiled because of that. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Okay, so then, and that goes to show you. In my mind, I'm thinking like you wish you had a brother or a sister, someone to play with. That's one of the things you should always say with the twins.
Right.
Is it's two of them, so you don't, as a parent, I guess. Let me
As a
change
parent,
that.
right.
So as a parent, it makes it a lot different, right?
Right.
So when you were parenting Key and he was the only child, there was a lot of attention that you had to pay to him, correct?
Of course. I mean, I'm constantly on the floor playing with the little figures, outside, just having to do all the entertaining for sure.
Okay. And so then with the twins and with our twins, do you think it was different? Or do you think you play with them more or less than you did with Keone?
I definitely play with them less because I'm always saying, they have each other. I mean, they want, Jamari still wants somebody to always be in the mix, but I'm
Right.
always trying to remind him, like, that's
Why you
the
have your
whole
brother.
reason why you have a twin. Play it. Like, go. Y'all go play. And they're getting better. I think as they get older, getting better with that. Like, last night they were just like, I think like 40 minutes playing by themselves, which was nice.
Right,
because
right.
Keone would never. So how's it for you with your kids since there's that age gap? Do you think that it was easier because they were able to entertain each other, or you had to entertain them, or how was that?
The reality is, unfortunately, because me and her mom, we went back and forth a lot of the times. With Ania, there was a majority of the time we weren't together. So I would just get her during the weekends. So it was a single kid, and it was cool. She was really easy to deal with. Like I've told you before, I remember, we ate at McDonald's, which is a place we do not eat anymore for our own personal reasons. We don't want nobody
We ain't
coming
judging you
after
if you
us,
do.
right?
If you eat that, that's your it. sis.
Right. But I would give her some fries. I remember we would eat out because I didn't really cook that much. She would get in the back seat. And, we just had a good time. And because it was my first kid, when I got her during the weekends, during the day, we would spend a lot of time together and do stuff. Fast forwarding to with JJ, similar situation, Jermaine Jr. He was my first boy, he's named after me and all those types of things. But when I was with him and I had Ania, because she was a girl and it was a boy dynamic, Ania was like a mom to him. So similar situation. It wasn't like we were a family together. It was a similar situation where I was getting them, whether it was for a week or certain times of the day. It was cool because, JJ, he was pretty mellow. He was like how Kyrie is, real mellow, didn't really cry, unless it was something he really wanted or something like that. You could put him in front of like the TV or in front of an iPad or something like that, and he would watch his shows and so forth. And plus, at that time, I remember I was working at home, so I would basically, make sure he had something to eat. Put him in front of his shows, he would do it, and then every 2 hours I would go out and check on him. But mind you, he was in other rooms, so if something happened, I could hear.
Yeah.
But that dynamic, no, it was pretty easy. Just because both of those kids weren't bad kids, or they didn't, get into a lot of stuff like Jamar. I wouldn't say bad kids, but active. They weren't active kids. They were pretty mellow. Same thing with Ania. You sit her down, she would just, it was easy. And then when she got older, you just had her stuff that she needed to do, and it was pretty simple, with the both of them. And yeah, so, obviously when you have one kid as a parent, you have to entertain them a little more. When you have two with the twins, they entertain themselves. But obviously as time, when they're young, they're going to still need us. But I think as time progresses, our twins are only 3, about to be 4. But I think about time they're 7 or 8, it'll be pretty simple,
Yeah. They'll be more self-sufficient and have each other to entertain.
Right. Okay. Now I'm trying to do the conclusion. We're trying to have more of a structure with regards to everything we're doing, so we're not just coming in here and just talking, and then getting off on a bunch of tangents and so forth. But having a kid is a lifetime commitment. There are great times and there are challenges. There are many differences in having twins versus a single child. This is our experience, and we hope that this can help you a bit with either raising your kids or with some of what to expect before having kids. Thank you guys for listening, and we love you all, and be great.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.